I always imagined the past would knock softly, like a memory you can ignore. But the day after my aunt's funeral, the past rang my mansion's brass doorbell like it owned the place. $2.5 million. A house on Sycamore Hill with 12 rooms and a view of the river. A vault of letters, a key I didn't know I had, and a lawyer who kept looking at me as if he knew I'd need more than courage to keep any of it. 15 years after my parents left me with a note and an empty refrigerator, they suddenly returned acting like they had never gone anywhere at all. "Sweetheart," my mother said on the porch, mascara damp, voice too smooth. "We're here now. We'll help you with everything." Everything meant my aunt's will. Everything meant the accounts they hadn't earned. Everything meant me again if I let them. If you're new here, I'm Elena. This is the story of how I learned that the most powerful revenge isn't fire, it's boundaries. It's living well. It's choosing peace and proving, in court and in my heart, who my real family is. If you love real-life family revenge stories with twists and a healing ending, please subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Now, let's begin. I was 10. That morning, everything broke. There was a note on the counter written on the back of a grocery receipt next to a bowl of browning apples. "We can't take care of you anymore. Stay with Aunt Mira for now. Don't look for us." The apples smelled sour. The refrigerator hummed like it didn't notice I'd become invisible overnight. I waited by the window until the street lights blinked awake, then until they blinked off again. No car. No keys in the lock. No excuses. At school, Mrs. Carter asked where my parents were. I said, "They're busy," but my voice cracked on busy. By afternoon, a neighbor had called my aunt. She arrived in her slate blue coat, hair pinned, lipstick neat, eyes that softened when she saw me trying to be brave. She didn't say, "I'm sorry," or "Why did they do this?" She opened her arms and said, "Pack a bag. We're going home." I slept that first night in her guest room under a quilt that smelled like lavender and starch. I woke to the sound of her kettle and the sight of my favorite cereal on the table. There was a chore chart on the fridge and a houseplant I would eventually forget to water. There was a sense, fragile but real, that maybe, just maybe, life could proceed in a straight line again. It did not. Kids in the neighborhood could be cruel in the way children are when they smell difference. "Where's your mom?" they'd ask. "Where's your dad?" Some days I fought back with silence. Some days with lies. Some days I cried into my pillow so quietly I gave myself a headache. That year, my father popped up twice. Once to borrow money from my aunt, the second time to tell me I needed to be less dramatic. The second time my aunt stood at the door like a wall made of kindness and steel. She passed him an envelope and said, "Don't come again unless you can come to stay." He didn't. A month later, a social worker came. Papers were signed. I was enrolled in a new school. My aunt kept a box of my things by the door in case my parents returned. They never did. My aunt believed in lists, receipts, and second chances. She ran an antique store downtown, Myra's Finds, with gentle authority and a pencil behind her ear. She kept collections of other people's histories, porcelain clocks and postcards from places they had loved and left. "Everything deserves to be cared for," she told me, especially the discarded. She made me earn my allowance. "Work is a form of dignity," she said, handing me a rag and glass cleaner. On Saturdays, we took the bus to the library. On Sundays, we cooked soups that lasted 3 days and pies that were gone in one. Whenever she saw the ache in my eyes, she'd give me something to do with my hands. When I was 12, I asked, "Why do you care so much when they didn't?" She folded dish towels into perfect rectangles and answered, without looking up, "Because love is a choice, darling, and I choose you." Those 4 words rewired me. She came to everything. My science fair where my baking soda volcano toppled, my violin recital where I played 2 measures too fast, my first school dance where I dressed like a curtain and still thought I looked cool. When kids said, "You're not really family," she said, "Family is the people who stay," and then took me for hot chocolate I was too old for and exactly needed. We didn't speak about money much, but there were signs she'd done better than the average antique dealer. Her house, a a stately brick mansion on Sycamore Hill, was paid off. She had a gardener twice a month and a small safe in the closet with bonds she joked she'd forget the combo to. Once, she sold a painting to a collector for more than I thought paintings cost. That night we had steak, and she told me not to confuse thrift with lack. Being careful is how you keep what you have, she said. Being generous is how you deserve it. At 14, I found a file folder labeled Elena, important. Inside were my passports, school records, and a letter with a blank envelope. For someday, she said, tucking the folder back into the drawer. Not today. Teen years with Aunt Mira were a negotiation between freedom and rules. I could go to parties, but only if I texted her when I arrived and when I left. I could borrow her old Toyota for practice, but only if I filled it with gas. She taught me how to balance a checkbook and how to make a cheap bouquet look expensive. I worked afternoons in the shop. I learned how to polish brass, how to spot a fake signature, and how to say no with a smile. There was a regular who always tried to bargain lower than low. Offer him tea, she said. People bargain less when they feel seen. At 16, I was given a tiny corner of the store to cure it. I called it the kept things. People loved it. The first time I made a big sale on my own, my aunt framed the receipt. Proof, she said, that you can make what you need. Every birthday, she wrote me a letter. Elena at 11 talked about courage. Elena at 14 talked about choice. Elena at 18 talked about inheritance, not of money, but of values. I can't predict what life will hand you, she wrote. Only what I chose to hand you. Tools. On my 18th birthday, she took me to a lawyer's office. The room smelled like leather and seriousness. She introduced me to a man named Daniel Hale. In case something happens to me, she said, looking at me with eyes that dared me not to cry. Mr. Hale shook my hand and said he hoped he'd never have to see me professionally. But if we do, your aunt has left a map. A map to what? To safety, she said. To protection. To the life you deserve when the world tries to take it. I didn't understand then. I do now. Grief has a smell. For me, it's rain on wool and carnations. When my aunt died, suddenly, quietly in her sleep, the house felt too large for sound and too small for breath. The funeral was simple, the way she would have wanted. The town came. People brought stories about how she'd helped them find a lamp, a locket, a better price, a kinder word. I stood under a sky as colorless as dishwater and tried to memorize every face that loved her. The week after, Mr. Hale called me in. I wore the slate blue coat she'd left in the front closet like armor. He opened a thick file and spoke slowly. Your aunt executed a will 5 years ago and updated it twice. She named you sole beneficiary of her estate, property, accounts, business assets. After debts and taxes, the liquid assets total approximately $2.5 million. I stared at the decimal points like they were bruises. Me? I asked because I had nothing better to say. You, he said, and slid a sealed envelope across the desk. She also left you a letter and a key. The letter was in her careful hand. My Elena, if you're reading this, I'm in a better place, or at least in a place where people finally stop asking me for discounts. Please know, none of this is an accident. You are my daughter in everything that matters. Protect what I've left you. It's not just money, it's time, it's choice. I've done what I can to make sure the past can't steal your future. You'll find what you need in the safe deposit box. Trust Mr. Hale. Trust yourself. Remember, family is the people who stay. Love, AM. The key fit a box at Riverside Bank. Inside, documents, a ledger, photographs of us at every age, and another manila folder labeled in all caps, if they come back. I didn't believe in omens. I believed in lists. But that day, I believed in both. They arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, wearing contrition like cologne. My mother hugged me before I could step back. She smelled like vanilla and urgency. Oh, baby, she breathed. We were devastated to hear about Mira. We came as soon as we could. As soon as they could, 15 years late, and one inheritance on time. My father wasn't much of a hugger. He offered a stiff pat on my shoulder and looked past me into the foyer. "Big place," he said, whistling at the crown molding like it owed him rent. I didn't invite them in, but they oozed inside anyway, complimenting the rugs and the light fixtures that had once been background to my childhood. My mother cried in the living room and told me how much they regretted how things went. My father sat on the edge of the leather sofa like a broker evaluating a purchase. "We should talk about the practical stuff," my mother said after 5 minutes of memory-shaped monologue. "Lawyers can be predatory. We just want to make sure you're protected." "From what? From whom?" I asked with my eyebrows. Out loud I said, "I have an attorney." "Yes, of course," my father said, tone switching to managerial. "But you're young, and grief is complicated. Maybe we could move in for a while? Help with the business? Manage the finances? You know, family." Family didn't leave notes on grocery receipts. Family didn't show up for dessert after skipping dinner. Family didn't try to move into a house they had never paid for, to protect money they had never earned, from a lawyer who had done nothing wrong. "I'm okay," I said and meant it. "We insist," my mother said, and didn't mean in a helpful way. They stayed an hour longer than I could be polite. When they finally stood to leave, my mother took my hands. Her palms were damp. "We'll come by tomorrow with some papers," she said, "just to keep things tidy." "Don't," I said. "Give any papers to my attorney." Her smile pinched. "There's no need to be adversarial." "Then don't be," I said, and shut the door. That night, they called. They texted. They wrote emails with subject lines like "urgent family matter" and "guardianship temporary" and "let's avoid court." I forwarded everything to Mr. Hale. He wrote back one sentence: "Do not sign anything. I'll handle them." The next morning, a man with a clipboard appeared to appraise the property. 30 minutes later, a woman from a title company called to confirm I planned to sell. My bank notified me someone had attempted to access my accounts using an old security question, the name of my first pet, the answer to which my mother had once helped me choose. They had come back not for me, but for the mechanics of me, the codes, the keys, the signatures. The parts you can steal if you dress theft up as love. Mr. Hale moved like a chess player. "They're trying 3 routes," he said in his office, laying out a strategy map. 1. Guardianship. They'll argue you're emotionally incapacitated by grief and need oversight. 2. Undue influence. They'll say your aunt controlled you, and the will is invalid. 3. Power of attorney. They'll attempt to slip you a document to sign under the guise of help. "I won't sign anything," I said. "They're also attempting social leverage," he added, turning his laptop to me. There it was, my mother's new Facebook post, a picture of me at 12, braided and shy, captioned, "Reunited with our girl after years of being kept apart. Please pray for us as we navigate this difficult time." The comments bloomed. "So happy for you. Families belong together. Kept apart. The gall. We're filing a petition for a protective order," Mr. Hale said calmly. "And we're preparing exhibits in case they sue." "What exhibits?" He pushed forward the folder from the safe deposit box. "If they come back." Inside, certified copies of things I didn't know existed. A notarized relinquishment of parental rights, signed by both of my parents 15 years ago in exchange for a lump sum my aunt had paid to clear their debts and give me stability. A final decree of adoption naming my aunt my legal parent. Receipts of child support payments my aunt had offered to my parents out of decency, and their signed refusals. Letters my aunt had documented, sent to them periodically with updates and invitations to birthday parties they never attended, postmarked and returned, undeliverable. A therapist's letter detailing my adjustment and my aunt's consistent caregiving. Photos, videos, report cards. A life recorded as evidence, not for vanity, but for protection. She never told me. I whispered, flipping through the papers that turned memory into law. "She didn't want to weigh your childhood with their failures," Mr. Hale said. "But she left a wall you could call forward if you needed it." When the court date came, my parents arrived in their Sunday best and their weekday lies. Their attorney argued I was vulnerable, that my aunt had isolated me from my real family, that grief and sudden wealth had compromised my judgment. I watched him perform concern like theater and felt something old and scared in me lift its head. I pressed my palms to my knees to keep it down. Then Mr. Hale stood, unhurried, unflashy. He introduced Exhibit A, the relinquishment. Exhibit B, the adoption decree. Exhibit C, questioned the proof of a childhood nurtured, not controlled. He played a voicemail my father had left on my aunt's phone years ago, threatening to sue if she didn't stop sending the kids school pictures. He read the clause in the adoption that terminated all parental rights. He entered affidavits from neighbors who had never seen my parents visit. He showed the bank attempt logs, the title company call, the pop-up appraiser who couldn't remember who hired him. When my parents took the stand, Mr. Hale asked a single question that detonated 3 rows of their story. Where were you for her 11th, 12th, and 13th birthdays? My mother's eyes glistened.
We sent cards, she said.
To which address? He asked. She named an apartment we'd left when I was 9. Mr. Hale showed her returned envelopes stamped in red. My father shifted. We were struggling, he said. With what? Mr. Hale asked softly. My father hesitated. Gambling, he said finally, then work, then it was complicated. The judge's eyebrows met in the middle like a scolding. Rights relinquished are rights relinquished, she said. You can't sell them and reacquire them when convenient. Petition for guardianship is denied. Motion to set aside the will is denied. Petition for protective order is granted. My mother gasped. My father swore under his breath. Mr. Hale placed a hand on my shoulder, not possessive, not celebratory.
Steady.
Outside the courthouse, cameras from a local station flashed. My parents gave an interview I didn't watch. When a reporter asked if I wanted to speak, I said, "No, thank you," and kept walking. The best statements are sometimes made with doors closing. They came one last time. To talk privately, they said. To clear the air. I met them on the porch because the living room felt too much like a sacred place to bring old ghosts. We're your parents. My mother started, voice raw. You can't erase that. I'm not trying to erase anything, I said. I'm acknowledging it. You left.
She stayed.
That's the arithmetic. My father looked up at the house as if it had delivered this verdict. We made mistakes, he said. We're trying. You're trying because there's something to gain, I said. And the irony is the only way you could gain anything now is if I let you, emotionally, legally, financially. I won't. My mother's face crumpled. We love you. Then love me with distance, I said, and surprised myself with how calm I sounded. Love me enough not to unmake the life I built with the woman who chose me. Silence stretched. A bird landed on the porch rail and tilted its head like it was listening. Finally, my father nodded. A small, angry dip of the chin. You'll regret this, he said. I regret plenty, I said. This won't be one of them. They walked down the path bordered by the hydrangeas my aunt had planted and never looked back. I stood under the awning until the car disappeared, then went inside and cried. Not because I doubted my choice, but because even the right choices can ache where the wound was. Grief became a quiet roommate. It knocked around the house and didn't always pick up after itself, but it learned my schedule, and I learned its. I kept the antique store open 3 days a week and hired Mrs. Carter's niece to help. I turned my aunt's study into a reading room and her sewing nook into a corner for wrapping gifts for customers who needed something to feel like love. The money changed less than you'd think and more than you'd fear. I paid off the business's minor loan. I set up a scholarship at the high school, the Mira Award for the kept things for a student who'd been through something and kept going. I donated to the library because they had raised me, too. I hired a therapist because courage isn't the absence of shaking. It's learning how to hold the cup without spilling. In the attic, I found a box of old family photos. My mother at 16 in a dress she must have loved. My father grinning on a fishing dock with a fish he pretended to catch. I put 2 pictures on a small shelf, not as an altar to pain, but as an exhibit in my museum of truth. People are more than what they did to you. They are also exactly what they did to you. Both can be true at once. One evening, I stood on the balcony watching the river go iron gray with evening when a memory from the letter returned. It's not just money. It's time. It's choice. I wrote those words on a card and taped it to the inside of the pantry door where the chore chart used to hang. I traveled. Nothing extravagant at first. A bus to a city with a museum I'd read about, a rented cabin in the off-season. I learned to make cassoulet because a cookbook said patience tastes like beans and garlic. I adopted a dog named Locket who follows me from room to room as if I might disappear. I don't. Sometimes letters came from my parents, short, polite, apologetic, long, pleading, revisionist. I responded once, with an address for Mr. Hale and the sentence, "Please direct all communication through counsel." I didn't need to keep explaining a boundary to the people who taught me why I needed one. On the first anniversary of my aunt's death, I closed the shop and invited the scholarship recipients to the house. We ate too much pie. We told stories about the people who had chosen us when the world handed us scraps. Before they left, I gave each of them a small object from the store, a locket, a compass, a brass key. "A kept thing," I said. "Something to remind you that nothing about you is disposable." That night, I took the framed receipt from my first big sale down from the corridor and hung it in the hall outside the study. Under it, I placed a photo of Aunt Mira carrying a stack of hat boxes, laughing at something I can't hear anymore, but can still feel. The house stopped echoing and started singing again. A year later, the local station followed up. "Would you like to comment?" a reporter asked. "On the resolution of the case?" I thought of my mother's post, of strangers cheering for reunions that never were. I thought of my aunt's file labeled "If They Come Back," of the way she loved me into foresight. "I'd like to say one thing," I told the camera. "Family isn't always blood. It's the people who use their strength to shelter you, not claim you. The best revenge isn't winning a fight. It's building a life." I turned off the porch light early that night and went to bed with the windows open. Somewhere down Sycamore Hill, the river moved like time, forward, indifferent, full. I slept without dreaming I'd been left behind, because I hadn't been. I had been found. If you made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, please subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, your city, your street, the kitchen where you're washing dishes while you listen. And if no one told you recently, you deserve the kind of love that stays.